Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye is at the Park Falls Public Library interviewing candidates in 2014 elections. We're interviewing Mr. Graham Garfield. He's from Mason. He's a Democrat running in the 74th Assembly District. Graham, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Just as programming note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Graham, standard question, when I haven't interviewed somebody before, give us a short version of your bio, please.
Well, I'm from rural Bayfield County, which, if you don't know where Mason, Wisconsin is, I'm from a community of less than 100 people. So that makes me, I think, a unique candidate in itself. And I did grow up off of a gravel road near farming communities. And so I think it's nice to have a candidate that's not just from one of the cities within the district, but of course I have spent a lot of time in all the cities in the district. Okay. My background, I'd like to actually give thanks to the 4-H program in rural Bayfield County. For about 10 years I served in 4-H, and that gives you a very good understanding of what is public service and what is serving your community. So all through, elementary school, middle school, and high school, I was working with the 4-H program and getting a really good sense of what it means to be dedicated to a community. I started being involved with political work probably when I was about 14. I started volunteering with the local Chequamegon Democratic Party. And I've always taken a very keen interest in what is affecting my community, my state, and of course the U.S. as well as a whole. When I was 16, I worked with Governor Doyle's campaign significantly, working as a volunteer, calling folks and knocking on doors, trying to make sure that he could win that election. But in 2008, I got really substantial experience working on the Obama campaign. I spent hundreds of hours working out of the Ashland office, training volunteers, making sure people got organized. And I think in 2008, a lot of younger adults were inspired by the campaign of Obama and President Obama's work sense to be involved in this kind of work at a younger age and really to take what happens to your community and state personally. At UW-Superior, I received my degree in environmental biology, and I spent 4 years there as a member of student government. The first 2 I was a student senator, and for the last 2 years I was the student body president there. I also served for a year on the Douglas County Board as the student representative from UW-Superior. So I've been working with our community, and especially as a leader in student government, I've been working on issues of state legislation affecting the northern community that we live in and affecting the University of Wisconsin system.
Well then, you're a product of rural schools. What do you think? You are well aware of the issues facing rural schools. How would you try to solve those if you're a member of the State Assembly?
The issue facing rural schools is actually something that I do take very personally, because I was in the teacher education program at UW-Superior for 2 years, and I had full intention to become a high school biology teacher. So I was actually working in schools in Superior as a student of the teacher education program and as a volunteer working with students. And things that I see that are happening right now, it's really hard for Wisconsin to retain good teachers because we don't pay teachers well enough for them to want to work here. If I were to become a teacher, I would have to work in Minnesota or Michigan before I would even consider working in Wisconsin. And at that point, when I had the realization that Act 10 had eroded the fundamental rights of public employees, especially our teachers, so much that I would have to leave the state that I love and the community I love to be a teacher, I decided that I would have to do something else. And that's why I'm here today, because I want to address issues of education. Now, Governor Walker has taken about 11% of the funding out of our public schools. When you're talking about rural public schools that maybe only have 50 students in a grade, they can't afford that kind of a cut because that means a teacher, that means loss of arts or music, and at this point that even means having larger class sizes that may compromise the quality of our math education, the quality of instruction in English, the quality of any of the fundamental components of an education that prepare someone for college. So what I'm interested in is making sure that our public schools, whether they're rural or they're in a big city, give students a similar opportunity to have learned the skills that they need to go to college and to go into the workplace and succeed as a working individual.
Two follow-up questions on K-12 issues. When you're asked your position on Common Core standards, how do you answer?
Well, I worked with Common Core standards when I was in the education program at
So you support
UWS.
them?
I do support Common Core standards because Common Core is really wonderful, and yet in that it sets a benchmark for where you need to have students in a certain grade at, what skills they should learn to be college ready and workplace ready in the future, but it lets the teacher determine how exactly they're going to teach that subject or that part of a lesson. So I've actually worked with building lesson plans around Common Core standards in English and math, and it's excellent. It shows, you know, it's not reducing standards for some states. It's not going to remove the teacher's ability to teach a lesson. It's actually a tool for teachers to utilize. And what people forget is that teachers all across the United States were involved in building Common Core standards. So these are standards designed by teachers for teachers based on research. And what I will say about Common Core standards as opposed to vouchers, if we can get into that for a moment.
Let's get into vouchers.
Sure, let's get into vouchers.
I was going to ask your position on vouchers.
Good
thing, bad thing?
Vouchers are a bad thing, and vouchers are a bad thing because we have seen that only 1 in 5 of these kind of vouchered charter schools outperforms their public counterpart. So that's about 17%. So when we say that parents are getting the option to provide their children a better education by taking them out of the public school system, you know, I hope that parents know what's best for their children, but research shows that the public schools are better for their children. And as a person with a background in biology, I take real issue with the fact that some of these schools that are being funded by tax dollars now are actually teaching creationist curriculums. When you've received a substantial education in a state university in science, you are very, you know, I'm very personally frustrated to see that that's happened. And Milwaukee public schools can be used as a measure for how successful vouchers are in Wisconsin, because for 20 years the voucher program existed in Milwaukee alongside the public school system. And what we found is that someone who was being tested from one of those charter schools actually performed about 12 points worse in a standardized test for math than their public school counterpart.
Given your interest in training in biology, let me ask the position. What's your position on the mine, the iron mine for Ashland and Iron counties, which would be in the district you want to represent?
Yes, it would. Well, first of all, I will just say that my personal position on the mine is related to where I live. I grew up hunting and fishing in the Pinocchio Mountains and the rivers that come out of those mountains. So with my personal background in biology, I do not like the idea of an open pit mine being there. That's going to affect the community around which that mine would be located, and it's going to degrade the quality of our environment. But I have to separate my personal feelings from the feelings of, well, from what a legislator needs to do in state government. And from a legislator's perspective, we need to go back in and we need to amend SB 1, the very partisan law that essentially allowed mining companies the mining company GTAC to write the state mining law for ferrous iron mines in Wisconsin. It's not responsible to have a mining law that was passed on a party line and removes many of the environmental protections that were in place for mining in Wisconsin. And in fact, that's one of the worst mining laws in the country. If you look at Minnesota, where we have to say ferrous mining has been successful, they have many more environmental protections in that law. So I would first of all start by fixing that law. As for other issues affecting the mine, I think we do need a tonnage tax put in the event that that mine is permitted by the federal level and does come to our community. Mm. And we need to guarantee that any employees of the mine would be Wisconsin workers. That guarantee doesn't exist, and you know, I sympathize with the folks in Mellon that say, you know, we want jobs, and yes, you know, I want you to have good jobs, but I fear that that mine would bring people in from West Virginia and from Minnesota and from everywhere in the country that there are unemployed iron miners, and we may not see very many jobs go to Mellon. What we will see is we will see a very large environmental impact at this point, because we have not taken the steps to protect our environment. And as for the question of whether or not an iron mine would even be permitted under a responsible law, I think there's a good chance that that deposit is not as mineable as some interests would want us to think. It's not a pure enough ore body. It's not, from a depositional standpoint, it's at such an angle that they're going to have to take so much material off the top in order to actually get to mining it that it's going to do major damage to our roads, it's going to destroy wetlands, and there's going to be a long-term impact on the Chequamegon Bay and the health of the waterways.
Okay, let's touch on some other issues. Let's start with health care. The decision by Governor Walker and the leaders of the Senate and the Assembly to tell the federal government, thanks for offering to pay if we expand our MA program to more low income, but no thanks. Wise decision or not wise?
Terrible decision. Governor Walker's position is we are going to empower people who can't afford health care to pay for their own health care so they can feel like they've done a good thing by getting off of government benefits. These people are not seeking health care because they don't want to pay for it. They simply cannot afford it. And if you come from a community like the community I grew up in, you see people trying to raise families on $16,000 a year for a family of 4, and you're telling me that we're going to help them by allowing them to pay for their own private health care off the marketplace? That's ludicrous. We need to take advantage of Medicaid dollars when they're offered to us. We needed to expand Badger Care so that 133% above the poverty line for individuals and families was covered. And when the federal government offers you something to help out average folks, you don't say, no thanks, I as a wealthy male Republican know that these poor communities can afford to pay for it themselves. You have to let the federal government help your people and understand that they need that help, and they need that help right now.
Transportation funding. You're well aware of the importance of roads in northwest Wisconsin, yet there's a projected $650 million deficit for the State Department of Transportation. Do we delay some of these highway projects or raise taxes? Your answer?
Well, Secretary Gottlieb has been playing around with a number of ways to solve this deficit, and I'm not really impressed with the idea of raising vehicle registration fees. To get back to why this issue is occurring, it's actually in part a good thing. Wisconsin has become less dependent on foreign oil because we're driving smaller cars that are more fuel efficient, and we're driving less, so we're using less gasoline. That's a good thing. I don't think we should punish the people of Wisconsin for doing a good thing like that and supporting their environment. Instead, what we do have to look at is how smart is the spending from the transportation budget, and where are they building roads? Now, coming from this community, I don't think that the working class folks in this community see a lot of benefit from a major expansion of I-90 into Chicago. And while I can't say right now that I'm in favor of a general toll system tolling everyone, I have to say there's a lot of people from other states using our major freeway systems, and when I go to Chicago, I have to pay something like $20 in tolls to get down there. When Chicago comes up to Milwaukee and Madison, they don't pay anything to use our roads. And I want to know why I personally and the people in my community should have to foot the bill for that. Representative Reimer says that if we spend smarter, we can actually accomplish more. And the expansion of I-90, that's a $950 million expense. It may have to be delayed until we've found a better solution for this. And partial tollways or tollways along the largest roads going between Milwaukee and Madison into Illinois, that may have to be the solution. I'm more comfortable with that than having working class folks up here have to pay more to register a vehicle just because they've used yet less gasoline.
I'm asking all candidates this because it's so timely. Your reaction to Judge Crabb's reaction on same-sex marriage?
I'm in support of it. I think that same-sex marriage is just providing equality within our community.
Okay.
You know, we tried civil unions, but there was then a distinction between same-sex couples that were a civil union versus a straight married couple, and I don't think that that is ethical.
Two candidates for Attorney General say first offense drunken driving should be a crime. What do you think?
I'm concerned to say that first offense drunken driving should always be a crime, but I think we need to make sure that our state police have the resources they need to deal with this. Obviously, drunken driving is an epidemic problem in Wisconsin. And certainly if there is any kind of reckless driving or irresponsible conduct associated with someone being over the legal driving limit, they need to face the consequences right away. Now, I do say that perhaps fining people or requiring them to do public service is a corrective measure. And so in cases where someone was routinely pulled over and marginally over the legal limit, maybe they will learn from receiving a fine, and maybe it will impact their life in a negative way to have to serve jail time for that. So we need to be very smart about how we prosecute and how we deal with that issue.
There are calls in Washington and Madison, as you know, to raise the minimum wage. Your position?
My position is Minnesota has already raised the minimum wage to $9.50 an hour, and I think it's a great idea. I look at families in northern Wisconsin that are trying to raise children on $7.25 an hour, 40 hours a week, and there's no way to do that. I also look at the age-old, essentially saying that if you work all summer long, you can pay for college. And I have to laugh at that, because if you work 40 hours a week at $7.25 an hour all summer long, there's no way you can even afford a state university at this point. So minimum wage is historically low for its purchasing power, and I do understand that small businesses could have a difficulty paying a very high minimum wage, but especially for families and for a community, we need to raise minimum wage. We may need to look at a way to exempt small businesses from that, especially by perhaps subsidizing their losses if they have to pay out more in wages, or perhaps incrementally raising minimum wage over time so that they're not hit with a major expense all at once.
Okay, we're almost out of time. 2 questions quickly. One, is there any one issue that I haven't asked you about that you think is important in your campaign?
Certainly. We need to build our economy and build infrastructure. We need better access to rural broadband, because that's going to help businesses in northern Wisconsin. And we also need to be looking at building jobs in alternative energy in northern Wisconsin. Green energy is going to be the way of the future, and we can make northern Wisconsin a leader in green energy.
And then lastly, do you want to highlight any differences between you and your opponent in the primary?
Well, first of all, I think we do need to get a younger generation involved in government, and I'm hoping that my campaign will inspire some of the people who are not as old in our community to get involved with the Democratic Party and to get involved with state government in general. And secondly, the reason I'm in this campaign at all is because I wanted to see a representative that was going to be focused on legislative work and the issues. And to this point, my primary opponent, Beth Myers, does not have a platform on her website and has not been talking about the issues. You know, I think that's irresponsible. So what I will say is, in my campaign, I will always be focused on policy first and my personal qualifications second. I have worked a lot with legislative issues, a number of different things, such as the higher education lower debt bill, such as SB 1, such as Act 10. I've been addressing those issues as an elected leader, but more importantly, you know, we want to know what you're going to do in the Assembly, and so I'm going to tell people straight up what I'm going to do if I'm elected to the Assembly.
Thank you. Graham Garfield of Mason is a Democrat running in the 74th Assembly District. The primary is August 12th. Graham, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.